Okay, my name is Bill Pedersen, and I am a founding partner of Cohn Pedersen Fox. We began Cohn Pedersen Fox in 1976. The office profile is one where we have offices in New York, in London, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and we probably have about 500 young architects working in our office today. Well, if one looks at the larger picture, architecture is a very visible and permanent record of the hopes and aspirations of a culture. Those buildings that we leave behind are an obvious example of what our intentions were as a civilization. For me personally, the manner in which architecture participates in the larger network of our society, or the larger meaning of our society, I think is an important aspect. I believe that our democratic culture enables the individual to express oneself in a very overt manner at times. But the balance of individual expression and collective aspiration, to me, is something that needs to be achieved. And so when I think of any building, I always think of it in relationship to its ability to connect into either its site, particularly in those buildings that find themselves in a very powerful natural setting, or specifically into an urban context. The manner in which a building relates to that context and makes a connection to the context, and in a way offers the information for the future evolution of that context, to me is the most important aspect of what I personally am trying to accomplish in architecture. I think one of the important characteristics of an architect and architecture in society is to deal with one's connection to society with a level of humility that recognizes that we are one part of a much larger whole. I think that degree of humility has been somewhat, how will I say it, has been somewhat minimized. The aspiration of humility has been somewhat minimized by an excessive journalistic focus on the individual, particularly the individual who creates architecture. Architecture is created by a team of people working together. And I might go back a bit and say that Richard Serra said that when any piece of art aspires also to a utility, to be useful, it is no longer art. So one could say, no, we're not doing art. We're doing something very different. John Haydock, who was the dean of Cooper Union, said that when architecture is created by more than a single individual, it's no longer architecture. Doesn't know what it is, but it's no longer architecture. So in some respects, we're neither doing art nor are we doing architecture, because we work in an extremely collaborative way. Obviously, every piece of architecture has to have a point of inspiration, and that inspiration rises from a single individual. But it's the manner in which a group of individuals work together in a way where everybody's interest is focused upon creating the best possible solution to the problems that present themselves at any individual point of time. And so an architect's role in society is mirrored by the manner in which the architect works within his own organization. If one works within an organization in a way where one respects and depends upon the contributions of others, chances are that one's attitude towards the larger social framework will be very similar. Innovation can take many forms. It can take forms that are obviously focused on being able to interpret the world in a way that, or architecture in a way that has never been previously conceived. And that role of innovation, I believe, is held by a very few people. There are very few people that truly have enabled us to see architecture in a way that we've never seen it before. Most of us with lesser talents have to realize that our role in the creation of architecture lies in other areas. And for me, my specific intention in the work I've done, for example, in the tall building for over 50 years, is to find ways of making the tall building a participant in a society of buildings. I mean, the tall building in itself is insular, it's autonomous, it tends not to want to join with others. And if you look at the master plans that have been done in academic circles, let's say in the 70s and 80s, for example, at Cornell University, for example, Colin Rowe was famous for teaching a course on urban planning. But you will notice that the buildings that were introduced into these larger plans studiously avoided the tall building, and were largely buildings which were capable of defining space. And so me, the innovation that was really necessary was to find a way for the tall building to become a participant in a larger social network or a larger spatial network, and so that it had, in a sense, to become a more social structure as opposed to a insular structure. And so that, for me, was the dominant innovation of our office. And while there are subsequent innovations in the development of the exterior walls or the windows, various things of that type, I don't believe that we have ever been able to accomplish the largest goal, which is to be able to enable people to see our art, if one can call it an art, and I've already challenged that, if one can call it an art, to see it in a totally different way. And that is not our role. Networking. Well, I'm not a good networker. I'm really not. I think networkers are born. Networkers are those that what was the song by Barbra Streisand? People who love people are the luckiest people in the world, or something like that. And fortunately, my partner, Gene Cohn, falls into that category. Gene is a consummate networker, for reasons of strategy. It's just part of his nature, and he loves it. And I tend to be a little more withdrawn. And but the importance of networking is huge. Without it, our office would not exist. The ability for us to establish larger connections, or connections with a larger community is absolutely essential to our work. And very fortunately, we have that capacity. Not with me, but with others. Well, for me personally, I don't use the internet very extensively. Just no more than probably on average, well, maybe even less. An average person. Chris uses the internet a lot. But our office, it is an incredible asset. It goes without saying. I mean, without it, we can't survive. And the speed with which now we can produce our work, and the degree to which we can cross-reference our work with previous accomplishments is unprecedented for us, and is for every other architect. And frankly, my regret, and I suppose someone of my age, which I should state is 72 years old, someone of my age always has some regrets. But my regret is that I was not brought up in this computer age, because there are things that one can do with just in terms of one's ability to visualize and create, obviously, that one simply can't do with traditional skills. And yesterday I was working on the design of a chair in Pennsylvania with some people that had worked with Eero Saarinen and Harry Bertoia and people of that type. And I marvel at the accomplishments that they made for example, Saarinen's womb chair or Bertoia's beautiful metal chairs, which were done without any assistance of the computer, but were done primarily through three-dimensional modeling with clay or wire or whatever. So those were enormous accomplishments, and those accomplishments probably haven't been exceeded, frankly, in the design of furniture. But it is a great assist to be able to be fluent in that language. I mean, it is a difficult question. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright, for example, claims to have been trained by his mother in the blocks that he used as a child to play with. And so there's no question about the fact that being exposed in a way to play in a constructive way. It's amazing. I have a friend who's a sculptor, and in his studio he has a pile of leftover things from his work. And when his children come in, his children take and reassemble all of these things. Twyla Tharp, the great dancer, wrote a book called The Creative Habit. And Twyla recommends exercises for the creative mind. Very simple exercises, like taking a series of coins and putting them together and just arranging them in compositions that you find that are pleasing to you. I myself sort of pile rocks. I find beautiful rocks and I try to make them balance. And they balance in compositions, which I'll give you a book of my compositions. And it's not intended to be art, it's only intended to be sort of a visual exercise. Well, I think anybody who's interested in architecture can start by training the eye in terms of visual exercises. one also has to train one's eye in terms of the environment one is within, and be critical and think about buildings in a way, and they participate in society. Travel, obviously, is a huge advantage. But once you reach the point that you're ready to go to university, for example, and study, I think it is indispensable to, one, initiate yourself in a preliminary course which doesn't commit you to a full lifetime of architecture, but just to see whether you enjoy it. Past that point, then I would work in an office. And we had, for example, last year, a young man that came from Rice University, which is a very good school of architecture, and he was determined to be an architect. He worked with us all summer. We really work hard in this office, and all architects do. And he, going back to Rice, decided he didn't want to be an architect. For what reason? He wanted perhaps to pursue his career in music. But you know, that exposure, while it didn't lead him to being an architect, was necessarily vital to his future. And I think that's absolutely essential, just to get a sense of whether you like it, because it's a big commitment. And to commit 5 years to study, you really have to know that this is something you love. And if you don't love it, just don't do it. And that's the only recommendation I have. Right. I like that question a lot, because you can look at the body of work that I have been involved with, and whether it's good work, great work, whatever, that's for one to evaluate. But one thing I know for sure is I know for sure that I am very good at bringing a group of people together and working together as an entity to create something. And I think that fundamentally comes about because I very much need and appreciate the interplay with designers in bringing about something that seeks the best answer, as opposed to the authorship of the solution. I think that's the key to bringing a group of people together in any form of collaboration. And collaboration is, I believe, the future of architecture. It's the future of any art, and it's the future of all the sciences. How scientists or how anybody collaborates is essential, and collaboration has to begin with respect. And without respect, it's so much like a conductor leading a symphony orchestra. You know, the conductor is working with enormously talented people. Every one of the individuals are offering the best they can offer. But the manner in which it's all coordinated together is essential. And so in our office, we've always had the aspiration to enable a young person to come in and to grow and eventually become a leader in the office. And the leadership in our office now is held by individuals who began in 1980. And they have gradually taken over the leadership that Gene and I were supplying as founders of the office. And this for us is perhaps the most significant accomplishment of how the office will continue, how the office has improved, not just gotten bigger. The size means nothing, but the architecture has improved every decade. And that is something that I believe is a significant accomplishment.